So President Trump standing firm on his promise to get migrant gang members out of our country despite pushback from a U.S. district judge.
He actually said we shouldn't be able to take criminals, killers, murderers, horrible, the worst people, gang members, gang leaders, that we shouldn't be allowed to take them out of our country. Well, that's a presidential job. That's not for a local judge to be making that determination.
So the administration has until noon today to respond to the judge's questions on the deportation flights of the alleged members of Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang. They are now in El Salvador. TDA is one of the gangs and cartels the State Department designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Here to discuss National Security Advisor Colonel Michael Waltz. Colonel, thanks so much for joining the program.
Good to be with you.
So tell me, I don't know if a lot of Americans realize, but as a former Green Beret, you know this. We've targeted these cartels before. The president really doesn't need to declare war to go after them, right?
No, that's right. And Lawrence, let's go back in time a bit. I can remember when people were trying to arrest Osama bin Laden and were trying to arrest Al-Qaeda and debating whether they had the evidentiary standards to get them through due process here in the United States, which is a very high bar. We need to perhaps start thinking about these terrorists like what they are, which is terrorists. Unfortunately, we had 9/11 to begin thinking about Al-Qaeda like the terrorists that they are. Tren de Aragua has been labeled a terrorist organization. They are no different than ISIS. They maim, kill, torture, create mayhem and chaos on our streets in the United States. And I think if you had some of those, tattooed, shaved head men labeled ISIS, then we wouldn't even be having this debate. So this is about a wholesale shift on what a terrorist is and how they should be treated in the United States, how they should be treated when they're attacking our soil and when they're violating our sovereignty and when they're terrorizing our citizens. And of course, that is going to present an Article 2, Article 3 in the Constitution conflict. But really, that's what this is. And this is squarely under the commander-in-chief's authority to keep Americans safe. And I'm telling you, that's how most Americans see it.
So, Colonel, you would never give those operation details to a judge if you were going after Osama bin Laden. They're obviously trying to get you to give that information over about these terrorists. Now, I want to move on to the big call with Putin yesterday. Apparently, it was a 90-minute conversations. There's some reports out there that said that he kept the president waiting. I don't think that's true based on my sources. What can you tell us?
Completely false, garbage, fake news. This is between two heads of state, a major call. There's, sometimes some technical difficulties. The call started on time, and it lasted for a very long time. And both presidents covered a lot of ground, from the future of bilateral relationships, keeping, stabilizing the region, to solving this problem in Ukraine, ending this war, stopping the killing. They went into some operational details of the fighting. They went into big picture on how to implement the ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, people that are being detained. They covered a lot of ground. But I can tell you, Donald J. Trump does not sit and wait for an hour for any head of state. Look, this was an important historic call that only President Trump could pull both sides together. He's going from one side to the other. Our negotiators are going from one side to the other. And we are driving both sides closer and closer. Lawrence, even the NATO Secretary General of NATO said, President Trump, you broke the logjam. And everybody agrees now, it's not if the war ends, we're debating how the war ends.
So real quickly, Colonel, before I let you go, you're in a unique position because you did used to be a Green Beret. You've kicked down a lot of doors of some bad guys, but you've also had to work with some bad guys for the interests of America. So what did you make of the call? Do you believe that Putin was an honest broker? Could you believe what he said when he promised the president that they may be able to come to an agreement here?
Well, it's not a matter of whether you necessarily believe. This is trust but verify. Yeah. This is tough negotiation. Putin's a tough character. We have no illusions about who we're dealing with. But both sides, it's in their interest to end the killing, to end the massive loss of lives and treasure and material, and play this forward a year, 2, 3 years. You know, how does this end except World War I style grinding warfare with World War III escalation consequences? It's in all sides' interest to stop it, and that's what we're driving towards.
Colonel Michael Waltz, National Security Advisor, former Green Beret. Thank you, sir.
Today, I will have contact with President Trump. We have already had a really good meeting of our teams in Jeddah. I think everything went right, and I think I will hear from him the details of his conversation with Putin today.
That's Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. That was earlier today, saying he plans to call President Trump today, and that comes after Trump says he secured a partial ceasefire deal with Russia's President Putin.
We had a great call. It lasted almost 2 hours. Talked about a lot of things and toward getting it to peace. And we talked about other things also.
Was there non-negotiables mentioned by Putin? It was reported that I think the Kremlin media actually stated that he demanded an immediate cessation of aid to Ukraine in order to get to this multi-step deal.
No, he didn't. We didn't talk about aid. Actually, we didn't talk about aid at all.
Dan Hoffman, the former CIA station chief and a Fox News contributor. I want you to listen here to Michael Waltz. He's the president's national security advisor. Lawrence Jones asked if they can trust Putin.
This is trust but verify. Yeah. This is tough negotiation. Putin's a tough character. We have no illusions about who we're dealing with. But both sides, it's in their interest to end the killing, to end the massive loss of lives.
Dan, where do you see this? Are we sort of at square one in this discussion, or are we farther down the road?
I think we're closer to the beginning than the end, and I would just suggest for everyone's consideration that we mistrust and verify when it comes to Vladimir Putin. Look, Putin could have agreed to a full ceasefire yesterday, just as Zelensky has, but he didn't. He wants to create the image of being an affable leader of Russia who is willing to negotiate on things like hockey games. But his red line is that he still wants to subjugate Ukraine. And the will of the Ukrainian people is such that they want to fight back. They want to be an independent state. And Putin wants to do everything he can to destroy them. And there's no indication that he's changed that strategic objective. He'll make tactical moves in the near term. This immediate ceasefire on energy and on infrastructure is good for Ukraine, but it's good for Russia because Ukraine has been taking the fight inside Russia to their oil and gas facilities to try to limit Russia's revenues with which they use to launch their attacks against Ukraine.
Dan, a week ago, President Trump was asked what would happen, perhaps, if Putin doesn't agree. This is what he said.
But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia. It would be devastating for Russia, but I don't want to do that because I want to see peace.
So it looks like that might not be on the table right now, but it is something in the toolkit. The other thing is that Russia's been utilizing these North Korean soldiers who plucked out of North Korea, put on the front lines, and so the killings are not necessarily just the Russians, right? I don't think Putin probably cares that much about the lives of the North Koreans.
No, he doesn't care about Russians either. He alone is responsible for hundreds of thousands of Russian casualties, not to mention all of the innocent Ukrainians whom he has killed as well. Those are just statistics to Vladimir Putin, just as they were to Stalin. For Putin, all that matters is staying in power and his regime's security in the Kremlin, and he cannot allow Ukraine to enjoy commercial and diplomatic relations with the West, and so he wants to end that. But you're right, he's been boosted by North Korean soldiers and artillery, Iranian drones, as well as export market for his hydrocarbons to China. He's not talking about giving that up when he's demanding that the West not provide Ukraine with the armaments they would need to deter a future Russian attack.
A last word, if you would, on the idea that Putin would want to drive a further wedge, if possible, between the United States and Ukraine.
I think that's one of Putin's goals. He wants to ensure that he exacts as many concessions as he can from the West, and he wants to be able in the future to attack Ukraine. He wants a bad deal for Ukraine, to drive a wedge not just between the United States and Ukraine, but also between the United States and our European allies. Putin knows that we enjoy $1 trillion worth of trade with Europe, and he wants to interfere with that. Listen, going back to his KGB days, the United States is Russia's main enemy, glavny protivnik, because everything we stand for, democracy, freedom, and liberty, everything enshrined in the Constitution and Bill of Rights, that's what scares Putin the most.
Dan Hoffman, thank you for joining us today as we, as you say, are more at the beginning than the middle of this process.
Thanks.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.